Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasme Sri Gurave Namaha. Om Ganana Antrapadigam Avamahe, Kavin Kavinam Upavashravastramam, Jeshtarajam Brahmanan, Brahmanaspata, Anushrunnoti Visida Sadhanam. Om Mahadipataye Namaha, Om Mahaganadipataye Namaha, Om Mahaganadipataye Namaha. Om Keshwaya Namaha, Om Narayanaయ Namaha, Om Madhavaya Namaha, Om Govindaya Namaha, Om Vishnuvaya Namaha, Matsudaya Namaha, Trivikramaya Namaha, Vamanaya Namaha, Sridharaya Namaha, Hrishikeshaya Namaha, Padmanabhaya Namaha, Damodaraya Namaha, Sankarshnaya Namaha, Vaya Namaha, Pradyumnaya Namaha, Niruddhaya Namaha, Purushottamaya Namaha, Dokshaya Namaha, Narasimhaya Namaha, Achyutaya Namaha, Janardhanaya Namaha, Upendraya Namaha, Hare Namaha, Sri Krishnaya Namaha. Dear friends, we came to the chapter 4th of Dashamaskanda. No, not Dashamaskanda. This is Dwadashaskanda. Fourth chapter in Dwadashaskanda. In this chapter, they give a description of 4 categories of universal annihilation. In Kannada, 4 prakaರದ pralayagalu. In Kannada we say. In English, there are 4 categories of universal annihilation. This chapter discusses the 4 kinds of annihilation: constant, occasional, material, and final. There are 4 kinds of pralaya. Annihilation is a pralaya, and the chanting of the holy name of Lord Hari, which is the only means of stopping the cycle of material life. 1000 cycles of 4 ages constitute one day of Brahma. 1000 cycles of 4 ages constitute one day of Brahma, and each day of Brahma, called a kalpa, contains within it the lifetimes of 14 manus. The duration of Brahma's night is the same as that of his day. During his night, Brahma sleeps, and the 3 planetary systems meet destruction. This is the Naimittika Pralaya, or occasional annihilation. When Brahma's lifespan of 100 years is finished, there occurs the Prakritika Pralaya, or total material annihilation. At that time, the 7 elements of material nature, beginning with the Mahat and the entire universal egg composed of them, are destroyed. When a person achieves knowledge of the Absolute, he understands the factual reality. He perceives the entire created universe as separate from the Absolute, and therefore unreal. That is called Atyantika, or final annihilation, liberation. At every moment, time invisibly transforms the bodies of all created beings and all other manifestations of matter. This process of transformation causes the living entity to undergo the constant annihilation of birth and death. Those possessed of subtle vision state that all creatures, including Brahma himself, are always subject to generation and annihilation. Material life means subjugation to birth and death, or generation and annihilation. The only boat suitably for crossing the ocean of material existence, which is otherwise impossible to cross, is the boat of submissive hearing of the nectarian pastimes of Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu. This is the summary of this chapter. The chapter starts with the Shuka Uvacha. Shuka Maharshi is telling Parékñit Maharaj, Kalaste Paraman Vididya Aparardha Vadindrupaha Katito Yugamanam Cha Shunam Kalpalayadapi Kalpalayadapi. Shuka Maharshi is telling, my dear king, I have already described to you the measurements of time beginning from the smallest fraction measured by the movement of a single atom up to the total lifespan of Lord Brahma. I've also discussed the measurement of the different millennia of the universal history. Now hear about the time of Brahma's day and the process of annihilation. 1,000 cycles of 4 ages, 4 yugas, constitute a single day of Brahma, known as Kalpa. In that period, O king, 14 Manus will come and go. After 1 day of Brahma, annihilation occurs during his night, which is of the same duration. At the time of all the 3 planetary systems are subject to destruction. एष नैमित्तिकः प्रोक्तः प्रलयो यत्र विस्पृशको शेतेनन्तासनो विश्वमात्म्यस्मात्कृतचत्रुभुः. This is called naimittika or occasional annihilation, during which the original creator Lord Narayana lies down upon the bed of Anantashesha and absorbs the entire universe within himself while Lord Brahma sleeps. What Lord Narayana does? Narayana is going to lie down on the Anantashesha and absorb the entire universe within himself while Lord Brahma sleeps. This is called naimittika or occasional annihilation, during which the original creator Lord Narayana lies down on the bed of Anantashesha and absorbs the entire universe within himself while Lord Brahma sleeps. When the 2 halves of the lifetime of Lord Brahma, the most elevated created being, are complete, the 7 basic elements of creation are also annihilated. When the 2 halves of the lifetime of Lord Brahma, one is the night, one is the day, the most elevated created being are complete, the 7 basic elements of creation are also annihilated. O king, upon the annihilation of the material elements, the universal egg comprising the elemental amalgamation of creation is confronted with destruction. It is significant that Shuka Maharshi, the spiritual master of the King Parékñit, is broadly discussing cosmic annihilation just before the death of his disciple of Parékñit going back to the Godhead. By attentively hearing the story of universal destruction, one can easily understand one's personal departure from this temporary world to be an insignificant incident within the gigantic scope of the total material manifestation. By his deep and relevant discussions of the creation of God, Shuka Maharshi, as an ideal spiritual master, is preparing his disciple for the moment of Parékñit going back to Godhead, Vaikunta. As annihilation approaches, O king, there will be no rain upon the earth for 100 years. Drought will lead to famine, and a starving population will literally consume one another. The inhabitants of the earth, bewildered by the force of time, will gradually be destroyed. As annihilation approaches, O king, there will be no rain upon the earth for 100 years. Drought will lead to famine, and a starving population will literally consume one another. The inhabitants of the earth, bewildered by the force of time, will gradually be destroyed. The sun in his annihilating form will drink up with its terrible rays all the water of the ocean, of living bodies and the earth itself, but the devastating sun will not give any rain in return. Next, the great fire of annihilation will flare up from the mouth of the Lord Shankarsana. Carried by the mighty force of the wind, this fire will turn throughout the universe, scorching the lifeless cosmic shell. Burned from all the sides, from above by the blazing sun, and from below by the fire of the Lord Shankarsana, the universal sphere will glow like a burning ball of cow dung. A great and terrible wind of destruction will begin to blow for more than 100 years, and the sky covered with the dust will turn grey. After that, O king, groups of multicolored clouds will gather, roaring terribly with the thunder, and will pour down floods of rain for 100 years. At that time, the shell of the universe will fill up with water, forming a single cosmic ocean. As the entire universe is flooded with water, the water will rob the earth of its unequal quality of fragrance, and the element earth, deprived of its distinguishing quality, will be dissolved. As clearly explained throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, the first element, the sky, possesses the unequal quality of sound. As creation expands, the sound, as the creation expands, the second element, air, comes into being, and it possesses sound and touch. The third element, fire, possesses sound, touch, and form. And the fourth element, water, possesses sound, touch, form, and flavor. The earth possesses sound, touch, form, flavor, and aroma. As each element loses its unequal distinguishing quality, it naturally becomes indistinguishable from the more subtle elements and is thus effectively dissolved as an equal entity. The element fire then seizes this taste from the element water. The element fire then seizes the taste from the element water, which, deprived of its unequal quality, taste merges into fire. Air seizes the form inherent in fire, and then fire, deprived of form, merges into the air. The element ether seizes the quality of the air, namely touch, and the air enters into the ether. Then, O king, false ego in ignorance seizes sound, the quality of ether, after which ether merges into the false ego. False ego in the mode of passion takes hold of the senses, and false ego in the mode of goodness absorbs the gods. Then the total Mahat Tattva seizes false ego along with its various functions, and that Mahat is seized by the three basic modes of nature, that is, goodness, Sattvika Guna, passion, Rajasika Guna, and ignorance is Tamasika Guna. My dear King Parékñit, these modes are further overtaken by the original unmanifest form of the nature, impelled by time. That unmanifest nature is not subject to the six kinds of transformation caused by the influence of time. Rather, it has no beginning and end. It is the unmanifest, eternal, and infallible cause of creation. In the unmanifest stage of material nature called pradhana, there is no expression of words, no mind, and no manifestation of the subtle elements beginning from the Mahat, nor are there the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. In the unmanifest stage of material nature called pradhana, there is no expression of words, no mind, and no manifestation of the subtle elements beginning from the Mahat, nor are there the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. There is no life, air, or intelligence, nor any sense or gods. There is no definite arrangement of planetary systems, nor are there present the different stages of consciousness, sleep, wakefulness, and deep sleep. There is no ether, water, earth, air, fire, or sun. The association is just like that of a complex situation, is just like that of a complete sleep or of wideness. Indeed, it is indestructible. Authorities in the spiritual science explain, however, that since pradhana is the original substance, it is the actual basis of material creation. This is the annihilation called prakatika, during which the energies belonging to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his unmanifest material nature, disassembled by the force of time, are deprived of their potencies and merge together totally. It is the absolute truth alone who manifests in the forms of intelligence, the senses, and the object of sense perception, and who is their ultimate basis. Whatever has a beginning and an end is insubstantial because of being an object perceived by limited senses and because of being non-different from its own cause. The word drusutva indicates that all subtle and gross material manifestations are made visible by the potency of the Supreme Lord and given become invisible or unfamiliar at the time of annihilation. They are therefore, in essence, not separate from the source of their expansion and withdrawal. A lamp, the eye that views by the light of that lamp, and the visible form that is viewed are all basically non-different from the element of fire. In the same way, intelligence, the senses, and sense perceptions have no existence separate from the supreme reality, although the absolute truth remains totally distinct from them. The three states of intelligence are called waking consciousness, sleep, and deep sleep. But my dear King, the variegated experiences created for the pure living entity by those different states are nothing more than illusion. The pure Krishna consciousness exists beyond the various stages of material awareness. Just as darkness vanishes in the presence of the light, so illusory material intelligence, which is experienced as normal perception, dreaming, and deep sleep, completely vanishes in the brilliant presence of pure Krishna consciousness. Just as the darkness vanishes in the presence of the light, so illusory material intelligence, which is experienced as normal perception, dreaming, and deep sleep, completely vanishes in that brilliant presence of pure Krishna consciousness, the constitutional condition of every living entity. Just as clouds in the sky come into being and are then dispersed by the amalgamation and dissolution of their constituent elements, this material universe is created and destroyed within absolute truth by the amalgamation just as clouds in the sky come into being and are then dispersed by the amalgamation and dissolution of their constituent elements. The material universe is created and destroyed within the absolute truth by amalgamation and dissolution of its elemental constituent parts. My dear King Parikshit, it is stated in the Vedanta Sutra that the ingredient cause that constitutes any manifested product in this universe can be perceived by a separate reality, just as the threads that make up cloth can be perceived separately from their product. Anything experienced in terms of general cause and specific effects must be an illusion, because such causes and effects exist only relative to each other. Indeed, whatever has beginning and end is unreal. Indeed, whatever has beginning and an end is unreal. The nature of the material cause cannot be perceived without the perception of the effect. For example, the burning nature of the fire cannot be perceived without observing the effect of fire, such as burning object or ashes. Similarly, saturating quality of water cannot be understood without observing the effect. Saturated cloth or paper, the organizational power of a man cannot be understood without observing the effect of the dynamic work, namely a solid institution. In this way, not only do the effects depend upon their cause, but the perception of the cause also depends upon the observation of the effect. Thus, both are defined relatively and have a beginning and an end. The conclusion is that all such material causes and effects are occasionally temporary and relative and consequently illusory. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, although the cause of all causes, has no beginning or an end. Therefore, he is neither material nor illusory. Lord Krishna's opulences and potencies are absolutely reality, beyond the interdependence of material cause and effect. Lord Krishna's opulences and potencies are absolute reality, beyond the interdependence of material cause and effect. Although perceived, the transformation of even a single atom of material nature has no ultimate definition without reference to the Supreme Soul. To be accepted as factually existing, something must possess the same quality as a pure spirit, eternal, unchanging existence. A mirage of water appearing in the desert is actually a manifestation of light. A mirage of water appearing in the desert is actually a manifestation of light. The false appearance of water is a specific transformation of light. That which falsely appears as independent material nature is similarly a transformation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material nature is the external potency of the Lord. There is no material duality in the absolute truth. The duality perceived by an ignorant person is like the difference between the sky contaminated. The duality perceived by an ignorant man is like the difference between the sky contained in an empty pot and the sky outside the pot, or the difference between the reflection of the skin in water and the sun itself in the sky, or the difference between the vital air with one living body and that within another body. There is no material duality in the absolute truth. The duality perceived by an ignorant person is like the difference between the sky contained in an empty pot and the sky outside the pot, or the difference between the reflection of the sun in water and the sun itself in the sky, or the difference between the vital air within living body and that within another body. According to their different purposes, men utilize gold in various ways, and gold is therefore perceived in various forms. In the same way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is inaccessible to material senses, is described in the various terms of both ordinary and the Vedic by different types of men. All those who are not pure devotees of the Supreme Personality of God are basically trying to exploit the Lord and his energies. According to their strategy of exploitation, they conceive of and describe the absolute truth in various ways. In Bhagavad Gita and in Srimad Bhagavatam, the absolute truth presents himself as he actually is for the benefit of sincere people who do not all those who are not pure devotees of the Supreme Lord are basically trying to exploit the Lord and his energies. According to their strategy of exploitation, they conceive of and describe the absolute truth in various ways. In Bhagavad Gita and also in Srimad Bhagavatam, the absolute truth presents himself as he actually is for the benefit of sincere people who do not foolishly try to conceptually manipulate the Supreme Godhead. Although a cloud is product of the sun and is also made visible by the sun, it nevertheless creates a darkness for the viewing eye, which is another explanation, of the sun. Similarly, material false ego, a particular product of the absolute truth made visible by the absolute truth, obstructs the individual soul, another partial expansion of the absolute truth from the realizing the absolute truth. When the cloud originally produced from the sun is torn apart, the eye can see the actual form of the sun. Similarly, when the spirit soul destroys his material covering of the false ego by inquiring into a transcendental science, he regains his original spiritual awareness. Just as the sun can burn away the clouds and prevent one from seeing it, the Supreme Lord, and He alone, can remove the false ego that prevents one from seeing Him. There are some creatures, however, like owls, who are averse to seeing the sun. In the same way, those who are not interested in spiritual knowledge will never receive the privilege of seeing God. My dear Parkshit, when the illusory false ego that binds the soul has been cut off with the sword of discriminating knowledge, and one has developed a realization of Lord Achyuta, the Supreme Soul, this is called the Atyantika, or ultimate annihilation of material existence. Atyantika. Experts in the subtle workings of nature, O subduer of the enemy, have declared that there are continuous processes of creation and annihilation that all created belongs to. Experts in subtle working nature, O subduer of the enemy, have declared that there are continuous processes of creation and annihilation that all created beings, beginning with Brahma, constantly undergo. All material entities undergo transformation and are constantly and swiftly eroded by the mighty currents of time. The various stages of existence that material things exhibit are the perpetual causes of their generation and annihilation. These stages of existence created by the beginningless and endless time. These stages of existence created by beginningless and endless time, the impersonal representative of the Supreme Lord, are not visible, just as the infinitesimal memory these stages of existence created by the beginningless and endless time, the impersonal representative of the Supreme Lord, are not visible, just as the infinitesimal momentary changes of position of the planet in the sky cannot be directly seen also. Although everyone knows that the sun is constantly moving in the sky, one cannot normally see the sun moving. Similarly, no one can directly perceive his hair or nails growing, although with the passing of time we perceive the fact of growth. Timely, the potency of the Lord is very subtle and powerful and is an insurmountable barrier. Time, the potency of the Lord, is very subtle and powerful and is an insurmountable barrier to fools who are trying to exploit the material creation. In this way, the progress of time is described in terms of four kinds of annihilation: continuous, occasional, elemental, and final. These are the four kinds of annihilation described. O best of the crews, I have realized to you these narrations of the pastimes of Lord Narayana, the creator of this world and the ultimate reservoir of all existence, presenting them to you only in a brief summary. Even Lord Brahma himself would be incapable of describing them entirely. For a person who is suffering in fire of countless miseries and who desires to cross the insurmountable ocean of material existence, there is no suitable boat except that of cultivating devotion to the transcendental taste for the narrations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna's pastime. Although it's not possible to completely describe the pastimes of the Lord, even a partial appreciation can even save from the unbearable miseries of material existence. The fever of material existence can be removed. Although it is not possible to completely describe the pastimes of the Lord, even a partial appreciation can save one from the unbearable miseries of material existence. For a person who is suffering in the fire of countless miseries and who desires to cross the insurmountable ocean of material existence, there is no suitable boat except that of cultivating devotion to the transcendental taste for the narrations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's pastimes. Although it is not possible to completely describe the pastimes of the Lord, even a partial appreciation can save one from the unbearable miseries of the material existence. The fever of material existence can be removed only by the medicine of the holy name and pastimes of the Supreme Lord, which are perfectly narrated in Srimad Bhagavatam. Long ago, this essential anthology of all the Puranas was spoken by the infallible Lord Narayana Rishi to Narada. Long ago, this essential anthology of all the Puranas was spoken by the infallible Lord Naranarayana Rishi to Narada, who in turn then repeated it to Krishna Dvaipayana Vedavyasa. My dear Maharaj Parikshit, that great personality Srila Vyasadeva taught me this same scripture, Srimad Bhagavatam, which is equal in stature to the four Vedas. O best of the Kurus, the same Suta Goswami who is sitting before us will speak this Bhagavatam to the sages assembled in the great sacrifice at Naimisharanya. This he will do when questioned by the members of the assembly headed by Shaunaka. Thus, and the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 12th canto, 4th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Four Categories of Universal Inhalation. The 5th chapter after this comes to the Shukadeva Goswami gives the final instructions to Maharaja Parikshit. This chapter explains how King Parikshit's fear of the death from the snake bird Takshaka was averted by Shukadeva Swami, brief instructions of absolute truth. Having in the last chapter described the four processes of annihilation that act in this material world, Srila Shukadeva Goswami now reminds Parikshit Maharaja, now he had previously in the 3rd canto discussed the measurement of time and of the various millennia of universal history. During a single day of Lord Brahma, constituting 1,000 cycles of 4 ages, 4 yugas, 14 different Manus rule and die. Thus, death is unavoidable for every embodied being, but the soul itself never dies. Being entirely distinct from the material body, Sri Rukamahaswami then states that in Srimad Bhagavatam, he was repeatedly chanted the glories of Supreme Soul, Lord Sri Hari, from whom satisfaction of Brahma takes birth and from whose anger Rudra is born. The idea I will die is simply the mentality of animals because the soul does not undergo the bodily phases of previous non-existence, birth, existence, previous non-existence, birth and existence and death. When the body's subtle mental covering is destroyed by the transcendental knowledge, the soul within the body again exhibits his original identity, just as the temporal existence of the lamp comes about by the combination of oil, the vessel, the wick, and the fire. Just as the temporal existence of the lamp comes about by the combination of oil, the vessel, and the wick, and the fire. The lamp constitutes, you got an oil in the lamp, and there's a wick in the vessel, and the fire touching that tip of the wick so that it will give light. It becomes enlightened. The material body comes about by the amalgamation of three modes of nature. Three modes of nature is tamasa guna, rajasika guna, sattva guna. The material body appears at the birth and displays life for some time. Finally, the combination of material modes dissolves and the body undergoes death. A phenomena similar to the extinguishing lamp, Çukadeva Maharshi addresses the king saying, you should fix yourself in meditation upon Lord Narayana, Vasudeva, and thus the bite of the snake bird will not affect you at all. So Shuka Maharshi is telling Parékñit Maharaj, concentrate on Lord Vasudeva, and thus the bite of the snake bird will not affect you. Shuka Vacha. So that's the summary of the fifth chapter. Shuka Maharshi is starting with Shuka Vacha. Atranu varnate bhiksham vishwatma bhagavan harihi yasya prasadacho brahma rudra krodha samudbhavaha. Shuka Maharshi is telling, this Srimad Bhagavatam has elaborately described in various narrations the supreme soul of all that be, the personality of Godhead Hari, from whose satisfaction Brahma is born and from whose anger Rudra takes birth. Sri Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura has given a very elaborate summary of Srimad Bhagavatam in his commentary on this verse. The essence of the great Acharya statement is that unconditional loving surrender to Supreme Lord Krishna, as described by Shuka Maharshi, is the highest perfection of the life. The exclusive purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam is to convince the conditioned soul to execute such surrender to the Lord Vasudeva and to go back home, back to Godhead or Vaikunta Loka. O King, give up the animalistic mentality of thinking, I am going to die. Unlike the body, you have not taken birth. There was not a time in the past when you did not exist, and you are not about to be destroyed. At the end of the first canto, King Parikshit stated, O Brahmanas, just accept me as a completely surrendered soul and let Mother Ganga, the representative of the Lord, also accept me in that way, for I have already taken the lotus feet of the Lord into my heart. Let the snake bird or whatever magical thing the Brahmana created bite me at once. I only desire that you all continue singing the deeds of Lord Vishnu. Even before hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, King Parikshit was a Mahabhagavata. King Parikshit was a Mahabhagavata himself, a great and a pure devotee of Lord Krishna. There was actually no animalistic fear of death within the King Parikshit. But for our sake, Shuka Maharshi Goswami is speaking very strongly to his disciple, just as Lord Krishna speaks strongly to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. Na bhavishyasi bhutvatam putra potradi rupavan bijankura vaddeha deva tirthako yatanalaha. You will not take birth again in the form of your sons and grandsons, like a sprout taking birth from a seed and then generating a new seed. Rather, you are entirely distinct from the material body and its paraphernalia. In the same way, that fire distinct from its fuel. Sometimes one dreams of being reborn as the son of one's son, in the hope of perpetually remaining in the same material family. As stated in the Shruti mantra, Pita Putrena Pitraman, Yoni Yonaha. A father has a father in his son, a father has a father in his son because he may take birth as his own grandson. The purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam is spiritual liberation and not the foolish prolonging of the illusion of bodily identification. That is clearly stated in this verse. In a dream, one can see his own head being cut off and thus understand that his actual self is standing apart from the dream experience. Similarly, while awake, one can see that his body is a product of the 5 material elements. Therefore, it is to be understood that the actual self, the soul, is distinct from the body it observes and is unborn and immortal. When a part is broken, the portion of the sky within the part remains as the element sky, just as before. In the same way, when the gross and subtle bodies die, the living entity within resumes his spiritual identity. The material bodies, qualities, and activities of the spirit soul are created by the material mind. That mind itself is created by the illusory potency of the Supreme Lord, and thus the soul assumes material existence. A lamp functions as such only by the combination of its fuel, vessel, wick, and fire. Similarly, the material life based on the soul's identification with the body is developed and destroyed by the workings of material goodness, passion, and ignorance, or the constituent elements of the body. The soul within the body is self-luminous and is separate from the visible gross body and invisible subtle body. It remains as the fixed basis of changing bodily existence, just as the ethereal sky is the unchanging background of material transformation. Therefore, the soul is endless and without material compression. Evamatmanamaatmastamastainime stanme vamrsha prabho buddhvanu managarbhinya vasudevana chintaya. He is telling, think of Vasudeva. My dear king, by constantly meditating upon the Supreme Lord Vasudeva and by applying clear and logical intelligence, you should carefully consider your true self, that is Atma, and how it is situated within the material body. The snake bird Takshaka sent by the curse of Brahmana will not burn your true self. The agents of the death will never burn such a master of the self as you, for you have already conquered all dangers on your path back to Godhead. Lord Shukamarshi is telling Parikshit, the snake bird Takshaka sent by the curse of Brahmana will not burn your true self. The agents of death will never burn such a master of the self as you, for you have already conquered all dangers on your path back to Godhead. The real death is the covering of one's eternal Krishna consciousness. For the soul, material illusion is just like death. For the soul, material illusion is just like death. But Parékñit Mahäräja had already destroyed all those dangers that threaten one's spiritual life, such as lust, envy, and fear. Shuka Maharishi here congratulates the great saintly King Parékñit Mahäräja, who as a pure devotee of Lord Krishna, homeward bound to the spiritual sky, was far beyond the reach of the death. Aham Brahma Parandhamam Brahmaham Paramam Padam Evam Samikshanatmanam Matmanadhyadiskale Dashantum Takshakam Pade Lelihanam Vishapanane Nadrakshasi Viriremcha Vishwanta Pratagatmanaha. You should consider I am not different from the absolute truth, the supreme abode and that absolute truth. The supreme destination is not different from me. So Parikshita has to consider himself that he is not different from the absolute truth, that is Lord God Krishna, the supreme abode, and that absolute truth, supreme destination, is not different from me. Thus, resigning yourself to the supreme soul, who is free from all material misidentifications, you will not even notice the snake bird Takshaka when he approaches with his poison-filled fangs and bites your foot, nor will you see your dying body or the material world around you, because you will have realized yourself to be separate from them. Lord Shukamarshi is telling Parikshit, you should consider I am not different from the absolute truth. The supreme abode and the absolute truth and the supreme destination is not different from me. Thus, resigning yourself to the supreme soul, who is free from all material misidentifications, you will not even notice the snake bird Takshaka when he approaches you with his poison-filled fangs and bites your foot, nor will you see your dying body or the material world around you, because you will have realized yourself to be separate from them. The last shloka of the chapter, Etatte katitam tata yatatma prishtavan rupaha harer vishwatmaneschestam kim bhuyam shrotumichyasi. Beloved King Parikshit, I have narrated to you the topics you originally inquired about, the pastimes of Lord Hari, the supreme soul of the universe. Now, what more do you wish to hear? In his commentary on the text, Srila Jiva Goswami has elaborately demonstrated by citing many Bhagavan verses an exalted devotional position of King Parikshit, who was fully determined to fix his mind upon Lord Krishna and go back to home, back to Godhead, Vaikunta Loka. Here, Parékñit Mahäräja is very lucky man because he is a devotee to Lord Krishna, of course. He is a big devotee. In addition to that, Shuka Maharshi is blessed him to go to Vaikunta Loka before Takshaka come near to him. That's a great achievement of the Mahabhagavatam and achievement of Shuka Maharshi to the Parékñit Mahäräja. In his commentary on this text, Srila Jiva Goswami has elaborately demonstrated by citing many Bhagavatam verses the exalted devotional position of King Parikshit, who has fully determined to fix his mind upon Lord Krishna and go back to home, back to Godhead, to Vaikunta Loka or Krishna Loka. Thus, and the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the 12th canto, 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Çukadeva Gosvämé's Final Instructions to Maharaja Parékñit. This is the advantage of listening to Mahabhagavata. Parikshit Raja went to Vaikunta Loka before this Takshaka snake is coming near to him. Parikshit Maharaj went to Vaikunta Loka. This is important. नमोस्तु अनंताय सहस्रमूर्तये सहस्रपादाक्षरभा सहस्रनाम्ने पुरुषाय श्रुतये सहस्रकोटियुगधारिणे नमः सहस्रकोटियुगधारिणे नमः आकाशात् पतितं यथागतसागरं सर्वदेव नमस्कारः श्रीकेशं प्रगत्यो नमः सर्ववेदेशत् पुण्यं सर्वतीर्थेषु यत्फलं तत्फलं प्रमाप्त वासनात् वासुदेवस्य वासन्ते जगत्रयं सर्वभूतनिवासोऽस्ते वास्तवहृदये कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि नारायणायेति समर्पयामि नारायणायेति समर्पयामि हरि ओम तत्सत् हरि ओम।